Happy Friday. How you doing? Creature of habit. Ah, you know, what I said yesterday about, how YouTube has turned into, the junkyard heaven for a lot of guys. And like I said, the majority, not all of them, there's some decent stuff here. But the majority is turned into junk. You know it as well as I do. I had thought about saving that for my Happy Friday Weekend Review Roundup video this morning now. But I said, fuck it. You know, today, we're going to talk about one thing. Maybe this will help tie into what I said yesterday. I have a series that I have saved on DVR on history. It came on for a while. They had different segments on different topics. The men that built America, the Rockefellers, the men who built the railway system, and, turn of, 1900, turn of the century, and how this country developed, cities sprung up, and industry. They had one on the food that built America. Places we go, we eat at, how fast food started, McDonald's, Burger King, Papa Gino's. They got into all of them. And all the little conflicts with their competitors and espionage, stealing each other's recipes and whatnot. It was interesting. Then they had one, the cars that built America. And it went back to the early days of, was it Carl Benz, and how Mercedes-Benz merged and how that started. Mr. Chrysler, Henry Ford. Their competition, their feuds, their lawsuits against each other, espionage, even with GM heads in different divisions, how they started, how they had engineers and designers that worked for them that were selling information to their competitors, especially when it came to engine development and whatnot. And it was very, very interesting. Then they talked about how cars changed and why they changed. And it had to do with the highway interstates that started being built in the 50s. And that's when everything exploded in the car industry. And they talked about how cars at one time, unless you were wealthy, the average person didn't have a Cadillac, a Lincoln, a Bentley, These were the wealthy business owners. The average working person, you had your Chevy, your Plymouth, your Ford, your Dodge, Even Buicks were a little upscale, out of the reach of common working man. Your Oldsmobiles. And if you look at a lot of these cars, a lot of them, they pretty much look the same. If it was a big sedan, it had a long nose above a roof and just, dropping right down to a rear bumper. And the bulging wheel wells outside the body. And they were black. Didn't have a lot of color choices. Black and navy blue. Dark navy blue and black. You didn't have a lot of color choice. And people didn't care. They all had a dog dish hubcap on them. Black wall tires. And people didn't care. Because at that time, people viewed a car as just something you had to get you to where you had to go. There was no enjoyment in driving. It was just transportation, period, nothing more. People didn't travel very much. And that had to do with the fact that it took a long time to get someplace. You may want to take your kids on a vacation to California. You live on the East Coast here. At one time, it would take you 5-6 days to get out to California. Just going up to Boston, make it up to Boston in 45 minutes. At one time, it took an hour and a half for Route 140, Route 28, and Route 1 were built. We had to take the old Route 105 all the way up and snake it all back roaded and through every little fucking city and town until you got to Boston. People did not enjoy driving. It was more of a nuisance and a chore when they had to go someplace and it was 100 miles away. Driving was not a pleasure. People didn't care that just about every other car on the road, regardless who it was made by, was black like theirs and kind of looked like this, Which you really knew differences in cars. They pretty much all looked the same. People didn't care. They didn't care about style. They didn't care about creature comforts. As long as they had enough room to fit their family in it. And got them to where they had to go, work, a store, visit a relative or something, and that was about it. You know, I talk about Industrial Park, about where we used to race. There was a guy that he was from Fall River. He used to go down there and race once in a while. Guy was a little short shit. He was like 5'2". The guy was pretty cool though. And he had a car. It was a 30-something Plymouth Business Coupe. You know, Plymouth Business Coupe. Real small inside. It had a 4-speed on the floor. I think it was wild. He used to show up, had ladder bars. He used to show up with his M&H Racemaster wrinkle wall slicks on it. And he had ladder bars on it. Shit, I think it was wild as hell. He had a Chevy 283 in it. It should have had much bigger engine, making more power and more torque. But yeah, the car was pretty cool, you know. It's all black. You know, a lot of people thought it was a Willys. A lot of those business coupes, it was a Plymouth Dodge or shit, whatever. If you didn't know the difference in the grill and you were looking at them all lined up, then you could kind of tell the difference. But from the side, they all had that same shape, that nose, you know, those bulging wheel wells outside the body, windshield roof, like a little bubble roof, and then rounds right down to the back bumper. Those things are fucking small inside. Just a bench sheet across the front, and you could squeeze 3 people in the front. And that rear window was right behind your fucking head, man. You know what I mean? Those things were small. Now they had the sedans where it had a back seat if you had a family, you know. And a lot of people thought that car was a Willys. It did resemble a Willys in its overall shape. And a lot of them were like that, whether it was a coupe or a sedan. There wasn't a whole lot of difference in cars. It mainly came down to a fucking grill where the headlights sat up on top, you know, like fucking spotlights on top of the fenders, or like with the Willys, they were built into the fenders. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know, there were some cars that, unless you were wealthy, you had the Cadillac, you had the Lincoln, you know, a Bentley, shit like that. These were the wealthy people. But that's not what you saw out in the street every day. And people didn't care whether their car looked the same as their neighbor's car or the other guy's car. When they were driving down the road, every car that went by them, when they went by, they all kind of looked the same. Even though they were different manufacturers, people did not care. They cared more about just getting to where they had to fucking get to, and that was it. The interstate changed everything. The interstate is what allowed a place like Las Vegas to pop up in the middle of a fucking desert. You know? People could get to this place. Cities sprung up because of the highway system. Now people could get to these places that were out of reach at one time. No one even thought of wanting to develop a casino or a housing complex or stores or start a city or a town. Because it wasn't accessible. Now a road went through the middle of nowhere that at one time, because you had to get to someplace a little more important. Now, hey, we got all this land here. We can build this, we can build that. It'll have traffic going by it. People will stop. Gas stations started popping up in places that you didn't need them before. There's now little cities and towns were there that were not there before. The interstate changed a lot in this country, and it changed the car industry in a simple decade. The 1950s, man, is where things took off. Styling. Performance. Now a lot of cars don't look the same anymore. Fins, chrome. So now people are driving. They were able to do things they couldn't do before. Now driving became fun. It wasn't a chore where I'm only driving because I got to go somewhere. People didn't joyride. Now people would joyride just to see things they weren't able to see before, because now roads, highways, interstates were here that were not there before. It gave them a freedom they didn't have in the 1940s. Just look at the cars a simple decade earlier, from the 40s to the 50s. 50s cars were futuristic compared to the 40s cars. That there wasn't much difference between the cars in the 30s. There hadn't been a whole lot of change. It only changed like, in the teens and the 20s, once you get past, the Model T and shit like that. But now, people started to care about their car because they enjoyed driving. Now they wanted something a little different. They wanted more power with an engine. They wanted style. They wanted color. Cars now, two-tone cars. Some cars were pink, red, bright yellow, green. You still had your basic black and your blues. But cars began to take on their own unique character and distinction from one another. And that happened, and this was the line that really stuck with me. And I'm going to close right after I say this. And this relates back to what I said yesterday about junk and the guys that love their junk. I said what happened was in the 50s that had not happened until then due to the interstate and how people viewed driving as more fun and pleasure than they had previously through the decades. Now, a car became an extension of a person's personality. Hope you had a good week. Have a great weekend. Have fun and stay safe.